It says an error occurred. Okay, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live today. We will be talking about shaking off the shame of mental health. I'm here with Gwen Jansen, neurodivergent expert and author. I'm so excited to be doing this with her. It's been a long time coming, making this live happen. So we are both really passionate about this topic because both of us have multiple mental health conditions that have been difficult, and we've both experienced discrimination in the workplace as a result. We've both had these lifelong challenges, and we didn't always know that we had them. And we want to make this more reduce the stigma around these types of conversations. So we are being open about our mental health and being vulnerable to invite others to do the same. So Gwen, thank you so much for being here with me today. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, it's a pleasure. Like you said, I'm so excited to be doing this with you. It has been a work in progress for a long time, mostly due to my own fault, and I apologize for that. But this is really going to be a great session today, and I'm so excited that we are finally at the live point. So I'm Gwen Jansen. I am a nurse and leader by background and training. I'm also an educator, and I am a late diagnosis ADHDer and autistic professional who really didn't receive my diagnoses or really learn anything in depth about neurodiversity until my mid-30s, right? And that came after a lifetime of multiple other mental health diagnoses, some of which were kind of missing the mark a little bit. I think maybe getting construed with some of the ADHD and autism symptoms that had gone unrecognized. And so to your point, definitely have been on the receiving end of a lot of stigma, a lot of negativity related to mental health. And so it is so important that we continue these conversations, that we advocate for safe spaces for people to be able to have these conversations in productive ways. And we really create a community of support for those that are working up to, being able to talk as openly as we're comfortable doing.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for everyone who is here. Christy, Karen, Andrew, and Amanda. Good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time today. We will have some special offers for everyone who attends today that we'll tell you at the end. So stay through the end if you can. Thank you, Gwen, once again for being here. This is such an important topic for both of us, and I feel like it's rare that the topic of mental health doesn't come up in some form or fashion for me and my clients when I'm talking to them. Even if it's just mental wellness and they don't necessarily have a diagnosis, just being aware of our mental health and well-being is essential. So this topic applies to everyone, whether you have a diagnosis or not. You can help create a healthy environment for other people who do in the workplace, or even as an entrepreneur. Being aware, if you are advising others, helping others as an entrepreneur, knowing that these are real challenges that people face, being educated about this topic will enable you to better serve those customers. So let's head into first stigma and why it's harmful, what stigma looks like in the workplace and everyday life. Gwen, what, from your experience, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think, it's so funny because even though we feel like we've made so many leaps and bounds in improving the ability for people to be open about their mental health, improving awareness and education for the general population and for people that have mental health and neurodiversity diagnoses, I really do believe that there is still such a strong stigma, right? Even in 2023, you hear people use terms like, oh, they're definitely on the spectrum, or they must be on the spectrum, right? Or, oh God, she's so bipolar, or you know what I mean? Things like that. Like people use these pejorative or these terms pejoratively. And I think that it really, whether unintentionally or not, sends this message that it is not safe to be honest about, about mental health and, the struggles that go along with it. So when we talk about stigma, I've been someone that has never understood why it's not okay to talk about these things, right? Like, why wouldn't we be very open and honest about what we're struggling with so that we can support one another, because everyone has struggles, regardless of
Right.
what the caliber is, or, the, how it is that they experience these difficulties. Everyone struggles with something at some point in their life, right? And across the lifespan. And so for me, I really felt like, and I get very personal, so I apologize. I will warn people, this is a trigger warning for, suicide attempts, that, when I was in college, I attempted suicide after my freshman year due to some mental health challenges that I was having. This was far before anything that I knew about neurodiversity or my own diagnoses. At the time, I think I had been told depression, anxiety, potentially borderline personality, right? Was what I had heard back then. And I remember after that attempt was unsuccessful, lost every single one of my friends with the exception of maybe one, right? Like, nobody wants to talk to you anymore. Like, everybody treats you like a pariah.
Oh my
When
gosh.
realistically you've never needed support more in your life, right?
Mhm.
And so that's obviously an extreme example. Some kind of lesser examples are when I do talk openly, back then and now, about kind of what I'm struggling with, a lot of times it makes people very uncomfortable, right? Like, they kind of shy away, like they're like, oh, like you can see like a little, almost like, perceptible cringe, that they're kind of like, I don't really feel comfortable talking about that. And so
Yeah. I
it can.
think sometimes also it's people don't know how to respond. They
Mhm.
want to respond empathetically, but they don't know how.
Yes.
Sheryl Sandberg kind of talks about that principle when her husband died, where everyone was like, they just didn't know what to say when she was going through all this grief.
Hmm.
And so they just said nothing, which also wasn't helpful, right? They didn't want to say something hurtful, they didn't want to say something wrong or insensitive, so they just avoided her.
Hmm.
Whereas what she really needed was, just someone to say like, "Hey, I'm thinking of you. I can and offering something instead of saying, "Hey, reach out if you need something," because then it puts something on their plate. And instead, you can just say, hey, like if someone's in the hospital or someone's having a hard time, like, hey, I'm downstairs in the lobby for the next 30 minutes if you need a hug,
Hmm.
like just something simple like that. Or I can meet you on campus, like whatever, wherever a person is in life. If it's a coworker and you notice someone struggling, or a friend on LinkedIn, whoever it might be, you can just say like, I'm available for you.
Hmm.
Um, whatever it is that you have have to offer, because everyone does, even if you don't have experience with mental health challenges yourself, you can still offer help.
Hmm. I think you make a really important distinction there, Lori. And I love that you bring up the fact that it's important that we don't put more onus on the people that are in need of support, right? As much as we can show up for them without expecting them to tell us everything that they need, right? Within reason. And I think this is a really important piece, is empathy versus sympathy, right? I think a lot of people naturally feel that if they haven't directly experienced whatever this person is going through, or if they can't even imagine what it must be like, they automatically assume that they have nothing to offer, right? When realistically, we can show up in very meaningful ways for people, just understanding that the situation must be horrific, right? Or must
Right.
be very impactful and heavy for them to carry. And so you don't have to have any experience in what that person is feeling or going through to still be able to be an incredible support system. And I think the key there is that we as support people need to be comfortable getting uncomfortable, right? We need to be able to
So
sit
true.
with those feelings of like, oh God, like I don't know what to say, right? Like I can't imagine losing my significant other. I can't imagine losing a child or having, my house burned down or something like that. And we need to be able to sit in that ourselves, right? And that's a lot of personal work that we need to do. And I think everyone should do, right? Like it's a part of our development to not shy away from what's uncomfortable, because it's incredible how we can show up for others when we're willing to sit in that for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I want people in the chat, tell us what stigma has looked like for you, whether you've experienced it or you observed it. What has that looked like? What has that been? What has that experience been? I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that. Mike, no worries. Feel free to watch later. It is recorded on LinkedIn, so you can watch at your leisure. And so going through stigma, we've talked about that, and we'll look in the comments as people share. Tell us about neurodivergent masking. That's something that I'm not hugely that principle is not something I'm hugely familiar with. My daughter has autism. My husband has about 10 years of experience working with people with disabilities, heavily people with autism. But that specific principle I'm not very familiar with. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this goes hand in hand with stigma for a lot of different reasons, right? So the phenomena of neurodivergent masking basically means that over your developmental years, it's made clear to you that how you show up authentically is not acceptable to society or to your, immediate support group, right? Whether that's your family, whoever brings you up, right? Or whoever you spend time around, you are given signals that indicate whether it's, like people are like, don't do that, or like, why are you acting like that, or like, oh my goodness, like, why, don't say those things, right? Or why are you so weird, and you receive these kind of negative messages that indicate to you, oh wow, like being me is not okay, right? And or like maybe you just have challenges with understanding social cues and things like that as it is defined like in societal norms. Because I would argue that it's not always like a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of social cues. It's just a difference in interpreting them, right? And so masking is the way that neurodivergent people have developed to be able to continue to function in society in ways that protect themselves. Or at least give the idea of protecting themselves when really it often does more damage, right? So it's basically, hiding, stifling, pushing down your natural instincts in communication, behavior, etc., to be able to match what you think is expected of you, right? So for a lot of neurodivergent people, especially sometimes those with autism, eye contact is very uncomfortable, right? Like, like it's something that people struggle with. Shaking hands, not always something that people love doing. Things like that, where they might develop the ability to force themselves to do those things, again making them their own self uncomfortable, but doing so because they feel the need to, right? Or for myself, I know in the first quite a few years of my professional life, I really struggled to show up as my whole self and my real self, because I constantly was and still sometimes do like mask at work, right? Where I will kind of push down my tendencies, where naturally I would love to be able to play with fidget toys in every single meeting, or stand up and walk around the room because it helps keep me focused, and have maybe really robust conversations about logical decisions that we're making or why we're doing these things. And I feel like those things are not universally supported in the workplace, right? And so sometimes you're just like, okay, like I'm just going to sit here, and instead I'm going to like shake my leg or tap my foot under the table, because that's the only way that I can kind of stim or get that that internal energy out that will be socially acceptable. Or kind of like not opening your mouth and speaking when you really think you have a good idea, because people are like no, just go with the flow, like why are you trying to rock the boat and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the concept of masking. And the reason why it ties into stigma is that a lot of the behaviors that are innate and natural and that feel good for neurodivergent people are not widely socially accepted, especially in the professional space and in the educational space. And so, they develop this defense mechanism.
Yeah. a lot of mental health conditions aren't clearly understood. And like you said at the beginning, saying things like, oh, I'm so OCD, or they're so bipolar. Someone having, hour or minute to minute emotional regulation issues, that's not bipolar disorder.
Mm-mm.
Bipolar disorder is having manic and depressive episodes for weeks and months at a time
Right.
that don't end.
Mm-hmm.
A lack of emotional regulation is completely different. And yes, there's there's a whole bipolar spectrum, just like any other mental health condition. But like, or saying you're so OCD when you like a clean house, that's not the same thing at all. The struggle and detriment to a person's regular activities on a day to day that mental health condition can play into a person's productivity and overall mental well-being is at a completely different level than, oh, I want a clean house because a clean house decreases my level of anxiety, which is true. Clutter increases anxiety, whereas the opposite increases or decreases. But there's more depth to mental health conditions than you might think. If you want to understand if a person shares what it is that they're struggling with, and each person's a little bit different, you can literally just have a conversation, be open with them, like, hey, I just want to understand what it is that you specifically have challenges with, so I can be a better coworker, so I can be a better friend and help you and make things easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who doesn't want a person to say, hey, I want your life to be easier, I want to be a friend that does that for you. I'm pretty sure most people want that kind of friend. So yes, 100%.
Yeah, and I think we should all really strive to be that type of friend, right? And I think naturally, right, like we get caught up in the day-to-day of of life, and sometimes we forget to, we're like, oh, if they needed help they would ask, or like, oh, if something was going on with them I would know, right? But being the type of friend that is going to reach out and say, how can I support you, right? Like whether they're expressing stress or overwhelm or anxiety or any of those things, that we're being a little bit more proactive to check in with people, right? And just say like, hey, even if it's, that I bring you a coffee tomorrow morning and that will kind of, help lift your mood, like you got it, right? Like I'm there for you. So yeah, I think that that's something that we can all strive for. Oh, Lori, I don't know if it's just me, but I, I
My
can't.
bad, I was muted.
Oh,
Our landscaping people are outside. It's really loud.
I didn't know if it was my computer. I was like, oh no, like I don't know if something happened with me, if everyone else can hear.
You're good. Thank you so much for letting me know. So yeah, thank you so much, Dutch, for sharing. Yeah, having that label for yourself um, can really be empowering and enabling, because once you have a name for what it is that you're struggling with, then you can start creating a strategy to help you be healthier, both physically and
Absolutely.
mentally. Understanding that condition more holistically can be very empowering.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, what can, because we talked about what people can do who are a friend, who's someone who can be of assistance, what can people who are struggling regularly with their own mental health, what can they do to advocate for themselves? What can they do to effectively um, like share specifically what it is that will help them? Because it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. What would you say?
Absolutely, right? And so it's so funny because Dutch, you just gave us the perfect lead in, because one of my number one pieces of advice in this realm is for people to sit with themselves and discover who they really are and what they really want after they take off the mask, right? And that's not always easy, comfortable, or safe, really, to be honest, to do outwardly, openly, and in public settings, right? So at work, at school, at, wherever, even sometimes with family or acquaintances. But I think the first step on that journey is sitting with yourself and trying to strip away, like, even if you sit down and write a list to say, all of the things that I've done, how much of it did I do because I felt like I had to or like I was supposed to? And what things actually serve me and make me happy and bring me joy, right? Like, I don't mean to sound like Maria Kondo, but like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that is a really important distinction. And to be honest, it can be a really challenging task to kind of separate out those two, to be like, what's me and what's the me that I only created to present to the rest of the world so that I could make my way through society somehow, right? Without being a pariah or an outcast.
Yeah.
And so that can take time, but I think it truly, the end result, or really it's a journey, right? So I shouldn't say the end result. The journey of getting to know the real you can be so incredibly rewarding, and it really can help you build a life that you were meant to have outside of everyone's expectations, right? So when we talk about shaking off the shame, it really helps to understand what matters to you, because at the end of the day, you're the only person living your life. And I completely understand how challenging it can be to let go of the weight of everyone else's expectations, and even society as a whole, what it expects of us. But living authentically for yourself is worth it 110%, right?
Oh,
So
so
spend
true.
that time, do the work, get uncomfortable, and tease it out, right? Little by little. And then as you figure it out, you can lean into these things that you know are truly you, and hopefully do over time less and less of the things that aren't serving you, and they're just these externally imposed expectations.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to cultivate the people that are around you to set yourself up for success, right? And what I mean by that is, not everyone has to like you, and you don't have to fit yourself into a mold to make certain people like you, right? You need to surround yourself with people that are comfortable and confident around the real you, that are going to support the unmasked version of you. And as you grow and develop and understand what that looks like, you are going to lose some relationships, right? People that I had previously been extremely close with, that I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be friends with this person for the rest of my life, right? As I'm doing this work for myself, I'm like, this is not pouring into me at all, right?
Right.
This is me trying, like, literally almost like begging this person to like me, and changing myself so much to fit what I thought that they wanted to have in a friend, or, a partner, or whatever.
Right. There's a certain level of likability that is valuable for influence. But
Mhm.
when we're taking away like the principles that we live by and what really brings us happiness just to please someone else, then it's not worth it. That's one of the things that I like is one of the top priorities when I work with clients. Like, I want to make sure that we're in line with your values and we're not changing you so much, like changing your communication so much that we're no longer being true to who you are. Because if you lose yourself in the process of whatever transformation, of becoming your higher self is, then it's not worth it in the end. And I like your first point of like the first step being sitting with yourself and understand, and like self-awareness and understanding and knowing what it is that actually brings you joy, who you really are, rather than what other people's expectations are of you. And starting in a place, because my question was, how do we advocate for ourselves?
Mhm.
Starting in a place where you feel safest to start practicing those skills
Yes.
is very helpful, because a lot of the time we think of like the biggest scary thing in regards to whatever it is we're trying to accomplish, right? If it's
Yes.
advocating for ourselves to our boss, that could be like the big scary thing.
Mhm.
But if you start talking to like a family member who you feel really safe with, or a friend who you feel really safe with about your mental health, right? And then you start doing that to other friends when that friend who you feel safe with is around, and then you expand that to other people, and then to other people you feel a little bit less safe with, and then a different group, and then you start talking generally about the importance of mental health in meetings, something like that. And then you talk to your boss specifically about your conditions. You can build up that skill. You don't have to go straight to that really scary thing. And you can take your time to get there. And yes, like, we definitely need the support in the workplace, but I just want people to know that, like, you don't have to go to that big scary thing right away. You can build up your confidence and courage in small ways, so then when you go to that hard, difficult situation, then it feels closer to that first challenge where you're communicating about your mental health, or the second one, because you've built that skill and your brain synapses have fired over and over to say, I can do this, I can feel safe doing it, other people accept me when I do it, and I've learned how to effectively do it because I've learned from my mistakes from while I've advocated, and I've learned how to do it effectively. I know what questions likely will come up. So it's like you can build that skill, and you don't have to do that scary thing right away. It's so important that people know that when I talk to them, like, we can do it in small ways. Like, we don't have to, it doesn't have to be really scary. Get uncomfortable in small ways to get there.
Absolutely, right? So, one thing that I wrote about in my book is, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? Just like you eat an apple, right? It doesn't matter what that end goal is, right? What matters most is what is the step right in front of you. And, you can piece things out and still accomplish massive things. It does not have to be this giant and earth shattering step one, right? It can be a baby step, right?
Yeah.
And I think, one of my favorite, kind of mantras or ideas is, that no is a full sentence.
Yeah.
When
I
you are
love that.
starting to set boundaries and work on, some of these baby steps that you're talking about, I think one of the early steps that can be really helpful is just to get more comfortable saying no and not offering an additional, sometimes self-deprecating explanation, right? Like to try and like placate the person and being like, oh, if I say no, they're not going to like it. So like I have to say no. And then all of these other
Justify, over justify.
yes, and all of these things when realistically saying no and just leaving it at that in a respectful way, of course, is really going to help you understand who within your life and what circumstances in your life will continue to serve you. Because if people respond really negatively and they are not supportive of you setting healthy boundaries for your mental health, to support your growth as a neurodiverse person, then clearly they're not the type of person that you need in your life for your best interest, right? To support your mental health. So that's when we're talking about baby steps, right? I think that's a really great one to remember, right? Just put it on a sticker, put it on a Post-it and put it on your desk, right? Like something, put it on a note on your phone, like no is a full sentence.
Yes, so true. And especially as women, we're conditioned to constantly give and give and give and give and be constantly communal.
Yep.
And so learning that no is so important. Well, we only have like 2 more minutes left. So what do you want to share with our audience, Gwen, that, as a final hurrah or principle, call to action, whatever it might be? What do you want to share?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about mental health and neurodiversity, so we're both of these, concepts that are overlapping, but also can be mutually exclusive. I think what I would like to end on is you're not broken. There is nothing wrong with you, and you do not need to be fixed.
Oh, I
You
heard
are
that so often growing up.
you are whole, you are beautiful, and you are a valuable human being no matter what you are struggling with. And please don't ever forget that. Don't let anyone make you feel differently. And if they do, you come to my inbox and I'm going to remind you how badass you are. Because that, I think, when we talk about the stigma and the shame that comes along with mental health and with neurodiversity, you hang on to this idea that you're broken and that something's wrong with you and you just have to fix it. And I want all of you to let that go, because
Yes.
you are whole, you are valuable, and you are absolutely wonderful and worthy exactly the way that you are.
Yeah, I constantly had that message over and over again that I needed to be fixed, that I
Mhm.
was the problem, constantly growing up. And that's not to say that we shouldn't, try to improve ourselves, but constantly hearing those negative things told to us are
Mhm.
not healthy for our self-esteem or mental health.
Nope.
So I completely 100% echo that. Um, Thank you so much for being here with me today, Gwen. Everything you said is so powerful. If anyone wants to learn more about neurodiversity in the workplace, feel free to reach out to Gwen. She is absolutely amazing. She recently published a book telling her story and about how to address these issues. So if that is something that you want to delve deeper in, she is an amazing resource. So I will be offering free strategy calls to anyone who just pops in the comments career. Just put that key word in there. If you want to improve your confidence, advance internally, if you want to, advance your job search faster and improve your public speaking. If you want to do any of those things, then I am here to support you. So I'm offering free strategy calls. If that is one of your goals this year, that I would love to have a conversation. Just pop in that word career into the chat. And this is for anyone who was here on the call or after. So just comment that word and you'll be entered into that drawing for those strategy calls. So
And Lori, I'll piggyback off of that. So, for anyone on this call, I would also love to, to do something for y'all for joining us today. So if you go to my website, endinstitute.com, END, like excellence in neurodiversity. So endinstitute.com, there is a section where you can order our book. If you order the signed copy of it and you were on this session today, I will not only send you a signed copy, I will also send you a second copy that you can gift to someone else in your life as a resource to them, free of charge. So just if you want to place those orders, you can do so on the website, and I will send you a free copy with your order.
amazing. That is such a valuable offer. Thank you so much, Gwen. Thank you, everyone who has attended today. You have been fabulous. Thank you for your thoughts in the comments. We've really appreciated the contributions and thoughts that you've shared. Again, feel free to reach out to either of us. You have all been fantastic. And thank you once again for doing this with me, Gwen. Everyone, have a fabulous day.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.